Screen printing, making a screen for printing with drawing fluid and screen filler. A 110 mesh screen works best for printing ceramic materials. The larger the number, the smaller the holes in the mesh. Since ceramic pigments often have a larger particle size, a larger mesh screen is easier to use, but it will limit the amount of detail you can get. Once you've got your screen, you'll need to get your image on the screen. An easy way to do that is to trace over your design with a graphite pencil to start with. I did find as I was tracing this that the pencil got dulled quickly by the screen, so just be aware of that possibility. This particular technique does not work well for fine lines, and it doesn't create gray tones at all. So in selecting your image, make sure that it is black and white with no gray tones, and it's best for bold graphic images. Once you have your image on the screen, you'll need your drawing fluid and screen filler. This is a kit from Speedball that has both in the kit. You can buy them separately too. To start making the actual screen, you will paint drawing fluid on the screen wherever you want your design to be. So this is where the ink will be able to go through the screen. When you're painting the drawing fluid, you want to make sure that the screen is elevated, meaning not touching whatever surface it is you're working over top of. If it is touching the surface, your screen will stick to that surface. And also, you're going to lose some of your drawing fluid to whatever the screen is sitting on. So here I have the screen elevated simply by flipping it over. I'm painting on the back of the screen. However, this does mean that I'm painting the design backwards. If it would be difficult to paint your design backwards, you could also just elevate the screen by putting something under all four corners of the screen before you start painting so that it isn't touching the surface of the table. Keep your cat away as you're working because the hair gets in the drawing fluid. He's always getting into my work. As you're working, I recommend starting in the corner opposite from your dominant hand so that as you're painting, you don't have to worry about your hand getting into the drawing fluid. The drawing fluid does take quite a while to dry and will be wet as you're working. Be aware that this video is sped up 900%. So this drawing took me probably 45 minutes to an hour to do, and none of this drawing fluid was dry by the time I was done. I am experimenting here with the limits of what this medium can do because I wanted to see if it could create more elaborate patterns. However, most people do choose much simpler designs to paint than I am doing here. As you're working with the drawing fluid, because this is sped up so much, it makes it look like it's quite easy to paint. However, you should know that it is very runny stuff. And so you need to be careful how much you're getting on your brush, or it might drip on the screen where you don't want it to be. If you do make a mistake, you can wash the screen and start over again, but then you'd have to let the screen dry before you can start painting again. I recommend practicing with it a little bit before you commit to your painting. You might be tempted to have very little drawing fluid in your brush, but if you only apply a thin coat of the drawing fluid, it won't block the screen filler well enough, and so you'll have areas of your design that disappear. So you may see me going back over some parts of the design with the drawing fluid just to make sure that it's thick enough. I have this detailed floral pattern that I drew out. I also have text and a linear drawing at the bottom here. So I wanted to try lots of different things to see what worked well with this kind of screen. I drew it all out in graphite because I knew it would make my life easier when painting. However, you should know you don't have to draw things out in graphite, but it would be very difficult, at least for me, to do text backwards if I hadn't drawn it forwards to begin with. That being said, I can report after doing this that it is very difficult to paint small text with this drawing fluid. The big JFSB there was not so hard to paint, but this tiny text that I'm painting right there was very difficult to make look good. I am not an expert at hand lettering, so maybe if you are, this wouldn't be so hard. The easiest thing to paint was this sheep. So these kind of bold graphic lines, very easy to paint. This is what most people would do with this particular style of hand-drawn screen. Once you're done painting, you need to let the drawing fluid dry completely. So when you touch it, it doesn't come off on your finger at all. I would say at least another hour after you're done painting. I did not time this, so I can't tell you exactly how long it took. It will still look shiny when it's dry. Once the drawing fluid is dry, you're ready to coat the screen with screen filler. And this is what will block the ink from going through the areas of the screen where you don't want to have ink going through. So basically the areas around your design. You need to stir the screen filler well. However, don't shake it. It says specifically in the instructions, do not shake the screen filler. It will get bubbles in the screen filler that will end up being holes in the screen filler once it's dry and end up being little dots where you don't want them in your print. If you do end up with holes in the screen filler, you can always just go back and paint more screen filler on the screen to fill in places that didn't get filled. It took a while to stir. Just like ceramic materials, you want to make sure you get everything from the bottom mixed in with the stuff on the top. I mixed it with a plastic spoon, and I'm also using that plastic spoon to apply the screen filler here because it seemed like it would make a mess if I poured it. I probably should have poured it because this is nowhere near enough screen filler. You can see me here, I'm getting ready to spread it and realizing it's not enough. So I add more, but it's still not enough. So as you're going to coat your screen, I would recommend twice as much as you see me doing here. Now this is a slightly more amateur way of doing this. I'm just using a plastic spreader. They do make tools that are a little tray that has the spreader edge on it. So you fill that tray with the screen filler and then draw it across the screen, and you get the exact amount of screen filler you need. But I wanted to keep this simple for this video. So since I didn't have enough screen filler, I had to add more, which isn't good because you shouldn't make more than one pass as you're spreading the screen filler. If you do, it can start to dissolve the drawing fluid, and then your screen filler will start to fill in spots that you didn't want to have filled in. And I still didn't add enough screen filler, so I'm adding more here. And making a second pass, which is exactly what you shouldn't do. And it did mess up that bottom left corner of the screen because I did this. However, this spot here, where I'm making a third pass, turned out just fine. So I think it's more problematic if you've got fine lines than if you've got big, bold areas in your design. Once the screen filler is evenly spread across the surface and covering the whole screen, it needs to dry, probably again for about an hour. You'll be able to tell it's dry because it won't be shiny. Once it's dry, you can wash out the drawing fluid. So that drawing fluid is water soluble. I'm using my kitchen sink sprayer here to wash it out with cold water. And it washes out pretty quickly where it's thin. It takes a little bit longer where it's thicker. You can see those blue dots on there. That's where the drawing fluid kind of dripped under the screen as I was painting because there was a lot there. It just takes a little longer to wash out. It's not really a problem. It just takes a little bit more time. The sprayer is nice because of the pressure, but if you don't have a sprayer, you probably could do this with just a regular faucet. It would just take longer to get it all out. You do want some higher water pressure for speed. And if things are taking a while to come off, you can also try rubbing with your fingers. And if that doesn't do it, you can also use a nylon brush, as I am here, to get the drawing fluid to come off where it's thicker. Also, if a little bit of screen filler did stick to the drawing fluid, sometimes you can get it off with the nylon brush. Here, I'm trying to get it off of the places where I passed over twice, but I did not succeed in getting it out of the fine text in the very upper right corner on that shot there. So the text wasn't all successful. However, the pattern came out very well. I've test printed it and it works well. I haven't test printed the sheep yet, so I can't tell you for sure if the finer lines in the sheep body came out or not. They look like they did, but I haven't printed that part of the screen. Once the screen is rinsed out, you need to let it dry completely, and then you'll want to tape the inner borders of the screen to keep ink from going underneath the edges of the frame.